Hi everyone, my name is Montana and I'm doing my literature review on pages 1 through 100 of The Great Mortality, An Intimate History of the Black Death, the most devastating plague of all time. It's a mouthful. So the first 100 pages are actually the first 4 chapters of this book, and it was published in 2005 by, the publisher's name is called Harper Perennial, and they have locations all throughout the world. They're a global publishing company with many smaller sister companies out of New York, out of London, Toronto, Sydney, and that's just to name a few. And they're also known as one of the world's largest publishing companies that exists. So I would say that they are very reputable. They do have a big umbrella, so when you go to their website, they have publishers for science books, for Christian books, for children's books. They're a very wide publishing company, and they have a lot to offer. The author of this book is John Kelly, and he is a graduate with a degree in European history, and he specializes in something called narrative history. This is one of many of his books, and he is so well liked that Pulitzer Prize winner Richard Rhodes called this novel a powerful, rich, moving, humane, and full of important lessons. This book has contributed a lot to the understanding of the spread of the plague or the Black Death during Europe. So far in the first 100 pages, he goes through not only the different types of the plague, because so often we hear the term bubonic plague, and Kelly makes sure to explain that there was three different types of the plague. There was the one we all know of as the bubonic plague, and these little, bulbs would grow on the necks and bodies and groins of people who were sick, and that was one way that people could distinguish that they had the plague. He also makes a point to acknowledge that the bubonic plague was the type of plague that if you were going to get a plague, you wanted to get because you had a higher chance of surviving, which isn't saying a lot because he says that the survival rate is about 60%. The second type of the plague that you could have gotten was the pneumonic plague, which was the plague affecting your lungs and your ability to breathe. And then the last was like a sepsis form of the plague, and it got into your bloodstream, and you were usually dead within 14 hours, according to Kelly. He also talks about, more importantly, I think the reason this novel is so significant is because more than just talking about the happenings of the plague, and I think a lot of other researchers tend to start once the plague has started, if that makes sense. They start their narrative of, okay, the plague is in Europe, and it starts, and this is what happened during Europe. Kelly does a very good job at going back, to look at the makings, like this roadmap of circumstances and situations that allowed for the plague to even spread. Kelly speaks of trading centers and the idea that a global economy, the makings of a global economy and different trading ports all throughout the Middle East and through Europe and Asia, how expanding the economy outward created almost the perfect storm for a plague itself to create, and how through generations, the more that people started traveling by land or by ship or by trains, it was just creating a bigger roadway for this plague to fester. He also talks about, the wars that were going on at the time. You had England and France who were fighting with one another. You had the start of, a bunch of just civil unrest amongst different countries that was sort of causing this uncleanliness and this, we saw this rise of death throughout. He also talks about how famines before helped, breed children who were maybe more susceptible to disease because they had grown malnourished or they were born malnourished and had weaker immune systems. So he really offers a lot about how European history as a whole contributed to how the plague was able to become as, deadly as it is, killing worldwide about 200 million people.